Yeah, I mean it's nice to see that they've got some performance back this year, and again they seem to have it across the board. The power unit seems quite good. The chassis seems quite good. They are, if anywhere, still lacking in outright straight line performance, and I think this is again going back to the power unit not quite having caught up with the Mercedes and the Honda from their problems and sort of legality issues from 2020. However, Ferrari feel very confident, as particularly as we go into Monaco weekend, that they have a low speed advantage in the car compared with their midfield rivals like McLaren and what have you. So it's interesting that Ferrari have kind of found a spot where they're relatively happy. Again, I think tyre management in the race, again, that comes down to the chassis and how much downforce they're able to run while not hindering their top speed even further. So again, I think with Ferrari, I think what you'll find is much like Mercedes and as Haas have almost been forced into, the performance in that car is going to come from understanding that the setup of the car, understanding the tyres and getting the maximum out of that. And I think most teams will start to revert to that over the coming races and being quite open. It's like, well, what's on the car now is there. We're not going to be throwing lots more parts at it. We're just going to try and tweak the performance, and that does work, and we've seen that many times in many teams over the years. It's maybe not such a fruitful and a quick bang for your buck way of developing the car, but bearing in mind where the regulations and where the budgetary regulations are this year and what's going on next year, I think this is the only approach a lot of teams are going to be able to take. Well, in terms of McLaren, again, they've had a number of updates, particularly in Spain, where they had a new front wing and a new floor edge. On the floor edge, they're really kind of not, I wouldn't say following, that's a slightly rude way of putting it, but they're taking the same solution as the floor edge that everyone else has. So halfway along the floor, there is a distinct step with some fins, and that stops the front part of the floor, and that whole front part of the floor is all about creating outwash, which creates downforce under the front of the floor, but also pushes the front tyre wake away from the back of the car. And then that second half of the floor towards the tyre edge, now they've lost the taper and gone with a stepped edge to a much straighter. The vortex that rolls from the top of the floor under and rolls back along that floor edge then goes under the car, in between the tyre and the diffuser, which helps manage the tyre squirt and get the diffuser working to a maximum effect. So they've done all the right things on that area. And again, as I was saying earlier, they also made a consequential change to the front wing where both the inner tips and the outer tips have been just increased in angle of attack slightly. Now, this would suggest that it's all about downforce, that this front wing creates more downforce. That's not necessarily the case. In these outer areas of the wings, the pressure difference that you get between the top and the bottom is much more about creating vortices that go back through the car. So on the inner tips you have the Y250, and on the outer tips near the end plate you then have the outwash effect. So by changing the floor, they realise they can maybe get some more performance out of the car by changing the front wing as well. So it's all a kind of whole linked thing, and it's all just in, as I say, this bottom 10 centimetres of the car, which is just absolutely critical this year, because the rest of the cars have been obviously developed very much the same as they were last year, but the only changes that they've remade is as a result of the regulation changes to the floor edge, the diffuser and the rear brake ducts. So this is what we'll see with most teams, and again I think those details will start to ebb away and everyone will converge on, which they nearly have already, the same sort of solution in those areas. But McLaren, yeah, as you say, Lando's had the confidence in the car very early in the season. I think Daniel now is, and I think Zach made some comments about this as well, Daniel's starting to find his confidence in the car as well. And I mean, it looks a very potent package, and if they're able to pull a lot more out of this car, they really are not too far away on outright pace from the Red Bulls. Again, I think when we come to the races, we see that they do drop away a lot more, and they're not getting the race performance out of the chassis and the tyres as much as Red Bull and in particular Mercedes are. But you could see those weekends where there's potential for someone like McLaren or even Ferrari to kind of be up there if the situations just fall right for them. Yeah, they have, and most of the work they've been doing hasn't been related to this engine cover. As we said earlier this year, everyone was looking at it and scratching their heads. That's not where the performance is this year. The performance, as I kind of keep going back to, is all in the floor edge and getting the diffuser to work. And this is the area that Alpine have worked very, very hard at. They've gone from a very basic starting point at the beginning of testing to the point where in the last couple of races they've really developed the flow conditioners that are along the top edge of the floor, particularly in front of the rear tyre, and also in the diffuser, which was a change that we saw in Barcelona, where some of the fences on the middle of the diffuser, rather than having sort of flat bottoms, are now curved upwards with a series of carcellations in them. Interesting. Alpine, the old Renault team at Enstone, love making all of these detailed parts out of aluminium. And you can see the bright silver updates on the Alpine very quickly. It makes my life so much easier. If you find something that's fresh and silvery, then you know it's a new part. And they've worked very hard, and they're finding the confidence. The drivers are finding the confidence in the car, and I think this is going slightly further. I understand that Alpine had a filming day this week ahead of the Monaco Grand Prix. And part of that, as we understand, was an updated steering rack for Fernando Alonso. And as we sort of look back through recent history, since F1 cars have routinely had power steering, but every driver's got a different way of wanting to feel how the power assistance varies from the straight ahead position to small degrees of lock to full lock. And this is all down to the effectively lots of metal spring on the front of the car and the spool valve inside, which then apportions the hydraulic control left and right as the driver steers. So as we understand, there's an updated rack for Fernando that just gets the feel that he wants from the steering wheel, which is, I think as road car drivers, we all feel, you can get in any car and drive it quite quickly. F1 cars are slightly different, particularly when you're a very experienced driver, you like it in a certain way. So if this has worked for Fernando, then you can expect his confidence to grow yet even further, along with the the engineering understanding of the A521. With that confidence, we could see them potentially catching on to the heels of Ferrari and McLaren in terms of pace. And I think we saw some evidence that back in Barcelona. I feel that Monaco could be a good race weekend for them. Then a few trickier circuits coming up for them. But I think over the balance of the season, I think we can see a bit of a renaissance there at Alpine. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would have thought, because Alpine have such a rounded engine cover and much less of a shark fin, then in some respects, it's certainly in a crosswind, potentially the shape of the engine cover could work better for them. But I don't think that is necessarily a big issue. I think some cars are just more affected by slightly different airflow, such as turbulence, crosswinds, or head or tailwinds. Maybe the Alpine does suffer a little bit with that. I think that the car that clearly does suffer the most with that has been the Williams, and the team were quite open in saying, look, this year we're going to create a car that creates the downforce, but sometimes in certain conditions, either track conditions or weather conditions, it's going to be upset by this. And we saw that, as you say, particularly in Portugal with the winds, and Barcelona, where the winds were changing quite rapidly from headwind, crosswind, tailwind. It really upsets them. And I think also that the Mercedes is another one of those cars that's quite sensitive to wind direction, and particularly working in other cars' way, because we saw so frequently. And I think one of the important things that we saw coming out of the Barcelona weekend is that Lewis understands this and realises, if I'm going to get a pass made, I've got to get it made quickly, because as soon as I get stuck up close behind someone, it's really going to kind of wreck my performance, potentially wreck the tyres as well. So when we then see Bottas stuck behind someone for lap after lap, that's just really working very badly against the setup of the Mercedes W12. And I think maybe he needs to have a slightly different approach in how he tackles being behind a car on with reasonable pace. Yes, it is. There is most teams run the maximum possible shark fin, but then there's also another situation where you can cut it down to the minimum to what they call the Toblerone section, which is just a mandatory cross section at the back of the engine cover, and then a little tiny, what they call a mini shark fin, or a baby shark fin, if you can remember you remember the song and the meme. And yeah, they play about with that, but interestingly, Alfa Romeo do cut that down, but conversely, the rear wing mounting pylons, they actually extend them to be as large as possible, and these have both the the yaw straightening effect of a shark fin, and also helps straighten the airflow over the wing as well, which again helps with aerodynamics. So they take quite a different approach to this. And the other thing with Alfa Romeo, they actually had quite a big update to their barge boards in Barcelona. Didn't really sort of hear too much about that, but there was a significant change to areas again on that sort of lower 10 centimetres, the footplate area, but also to the big boomerang wings that were extended forwards and changed shape slightly. And again, it's very hard to know whether that's really working for them. And hopefully that they will push maybe slightly more with the aero updates for the balance of the years to kind of bring them back on. It's interesting, when we spoke to Jan Moncho earlier in the year, that he was very confident with the team's understanding of the aerodynamics, but I do understand that there has been a change in personnel in the aero department with a key member who I'll keep nameless, but they've hired someone from AlphaTauri, which is quite interesting, as one of their chief aero guys. So they are pushing on that side of things, and again, for the balance of this year, it's going to be very important because they've got a tough fight on their hands in the back end of the midfield there. So hopefully we'll see lots more from Alfa through the balance of the year.